Continuing on, I want to share with you my top 5 rules as well. A lot of you said some of them, but some of them weren't perhaps said as well. So let me walk you through them in a little bit more depth. So rule number 1 for me, and I think it came up at the end there, is no phones. It is so important to have a meeting which has not got phones buzzing on the table or ringing in the background. You do not want people coming in and out of your meeting because they're receiving calls or texts or anything like that. Phones are such a distraction. They really are. And you have to ensure they're not hijacking your meeting. It sounds obvious, but encourage people to have their phones out of sight. Don't even have them in their pocket, because if they have them in their pocket, they're going to feel a vibration and you know where their attention's going to go. Put their phones in their bags or in their coat, something which is not physically on them so they can be more present in the meeting. And obviously, sometimes people have emergencies, and that is completely understandable. But I think what also needs to be understood is some people don't see an emergency as the same way as others. I was chairing a meeting once in university. It was a psychology committee meeting. And at one point in the meeting, a young man stood up and said, "I need to go and feed my dog." And I said, "Oh, is your dog outside the building?" And he said, No, my dog's on my phone. And I said, what do you mean? He said, "Well, I've got this game on my phone, and if I don't feed my dog every 20 minutes, it dies. Roxy will die." And he left to feed Roxy. So sometimes it can be important to establish that a dog, which is an app on your phone, is not an emergency to feed, and that you should switch your phone off and be present in the meeting. The second rule I have for meetings, and I think this was brought up once again by many different groups today, was one speaker at a time. Many of you talk about the importance of not cutting people off. And we definitely want to avoid that. It's rude, it's distasteful, it creates conflict, tension in the room. We want none of that. So by having a rule that one person speaks at a time, it ensures we don't get into that problem. The question you have to ask yourself as a facilitator is, how heavily do I have to influence or insert this rule? For example, you could lightly make this a rule. In other words, what you could say is, you're going on to a key topic. Let's say we're about to discuss who to hire for the HR role. You could open it by saying, "Who would like to start?" And then Samantha puts her hand up and says, "I would like to start." And then Samantha speaks. And then after Samantha speaks, we have Jerry stand up and he speaks. And it's very cordial, it's very calm, it's very flowing, and people speak after the other person has spoken. That's light moderation with this rule. Heavily influencing this rule is when you decide who speaks when. So instead of saying who would like to start, I would say, "Samantha, what's your thoughts on that? Jerry, what's your thoughts? Jim, what do you think?" So I decide as a facilitator who speaks when. You're going to have to choose which option you go for, light, heavy, depending on who's in the room. If you have a room which is very calm and is very respectful of everyone, and they don't cut people off and so forth, then great, allow it to be an open discussion. If you do have a room which is a little bit more boisterous, shall we say, tell people who's speaking when. It can be a very effective method. Third rule for you, and again, it came up a little bit, and it's very important that you state it at the start of the meeting. Everyone contributes. So many times you get people who show up to meetings just to sit and relax and not contribute in the meeting. They see it as time off, right? As an opportunity for them to have a daydream about Strictly Come Dancing. Or maybe that was just me in the past. But it's important that we make sure everybody in the room is contributing in some way. Everybody is adding something. If they're not adding something, if they don't need to be there, then why are they there? They shouldn't be in the meeting. We only want people around the table who are focused on the problem, focused on the objective, and have something to add, can contribute. That's a key indicator. Sometimes people don't contribute because they can't contribute. They're not in a position to do so, and they were dragged along to the meeting. We have to ensure everybody there has a reason for being there, that they can contribute, and we make it a rule that they do. fourth rule for you. Again, one I think you mentioned briefly, but worth looking at again. Be open-minded. Some people come into meetings with one idea in mind, their idea, and they bulldoze everybody else out the way because that's what they want to go ahead with. That's what they've decided is the best route forward. We can ensure that, well, we can't guarantee it won't be a problem, but we can set people up for it not to be a problem by making it a rule that you have to be open-minded, that you have to listen to everyone's ideas. And if you're not willing to be open-minded, then there's not a place for you in the meeting today, because we are here to go around the table, to explore different options and come up with the best solution together. This is not a one-man or one-woman show. This is a group working together to come up with the best idea possible. If you get that across early, it can serve you well later on in the meeting. And then finally, the most important rule of all is to ensure that we keep to time. We keep to time. You need to get an agreement around the table that you are going to keep to time. Now, you may remember that you've already allocated time in the agenda for each point. Point number 1 has got 15 minutes, 2, 15 minutes, 3, 15 minutes. So you have to make sure people are aware of that and that they agree to keep to that time. Because we're all busy people. We don't want this meeting to drag on an extra half an hour. No, we want it to stop even earlier if possible. And the only way we can accomplish that is by keeping to time. So get that agreement. And also tell people that if you are going over time, or if you do break any of those 5 rules, you're going to give them a timeout. And the timeout means that you stop talking and we move on to someone else, or we move on to the next point. We get the meeting flowing again. A timeout is something which will be very useful for you later on. So tell people, if you break the rules, I'm giving you a timeout. I'll tell you why, and then we'll move on in the meeting. So just to summarize those 5 rules for you, let me put them on your screen. Number 1, of course, no phones. Get the phones not even on the table, not even in the pockets, in a coat, in a bag, away. Get them away. 1 person speaks at a time. Everybody needs to contribute is number 3. Be open-minded, and of course, keep to the time as well.